Buffy Season 3 is great. It is the most consistent season, with solid development for old characters, and adds some new characters that will have major roles in the entirety of the franchise. It has solid Monster of the Week endeavors, as well as a great villain with an emotional payoff, and incredible thematic resonance that Buffy is known for. There are a few negative points, however, with some below-average episodes early on, including a Willow-Xander arc that just doesn't work, and a finale that can't quite match Becoming Part 2, but it's certainly in contention for the best season of the show. Choices and lies are the two big themes of the season. It's somewhat ironic that Lie to Me was the title of an episode in Season 2, because almost every episode has someone lying to others or themselves. Now, people lie all the time, but this season is more about the reasons that people lie, what drives them to create a fictional reality. Faith as a character is all about this. Even early on, it's revealed that her cool girl persona is a mask for deep insecurities and hurt, and therefore almost every attempt to deal with those problems is met with the same facade. Almost the entirety of her character is driven through fear. Buffy similarly lies out of fear, first to others when she hides Angel's return, and then to herself when she imagines a normal life with Angel, as she is so desperately afraid of losing him again. Willow and Xander's tryst, much as I dislike it, is also about choices the two characters make, how afraid they are of being discovered, and even understanding why the attraction exists in the first place. This season has some major decisions made by both Slayers and Giles. Giles chooses to stray away from the Council's instruction and is fired due to his love for Buffy. She in turn abandons the Watchers when they are unwilling to help Angel, a choice that has far-reaching consequences. Faith ultimately chooses the bad path, aligning herself with the Mayor after an unfortunate mistake, leading to her own self-destruction. Many of the Monster of the Week episodes deal with these themes as well. The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde homage features an abuse victim so deep into her own delusions she becomes catatonic. In Gingerbread, the whispered lies of an old demon create a mob willing to kill their own children, and The Wish is all about choices, how one decision from Buffy changes the entire world, and the lives of all her friends. Looking at an overview of the season, it's impressive how consistently amazing the second half is. Everything from Gingerbread onwards is great at worst, without a bad episode among them. There are some less than stellar moments, but for each misstep, there are half a dozen creative ideas that make up for it, and it's truly a delight. The most important thing in Buffy is the characters, and Buffy is the one with the biggest changes, being forced to grow up prematurely in a number of different ways, and they're a real test to her morality, and the ability to exist in the world, as a Slayer and a person. This all begins with the big changes that occurred at the end of last season, with her losing her school, her home, and her boyfriend. In Anne, the season premiere, she has even lost her name, taking on another identity. This doesn't last for long, but it still gives a sense of consequence to the choices she has made. Throughout much of the early season, she is pressed into uncomfortable situations, and has to adapt in order to face them. She has to deal with friends who are upset with her for leaving, and new faces who seem to get all the attention, people who don't want to be saved, and the mysteriously resurrected Angel, who is more beast than man at first. Throughout all of this, her want to do right is highlighted, even when she isn't sure what choice that is, which is the biggest thing that separates her from Faith. There are a few points during the season when it really feels like she is in a good place, and then it's taken away. She meets Scott, and despite some initial trepidation, they start dating, and her life is back on track. Then she gets dumped, and is reminded of the consequences of being a Slayer. Angel is finally back to normal when Spike arrives and put a spotlight on how just being friends won't work. Then she gets together with Angel, and she begins to plan her future with him, causing him to leave Sunnydale forever. There's certainly moments of joy in there, but just like Angel, Buffy is so often denied her moments of true happiness. But while Season 3 presents obstacles and villains, it doesn't require the same shift that fighting Angelus did. She has to deal with the lies her parents told her, just like last season. She has to confront an ally that has become evil, just like last season. She has to find her place in a world, which is a constant thread throughout the entire series. Ultimately, it feels like this season is when the show really grew beyond Buffy as the sole focus. It became about her world. Willow is in a similar situation, taking what she learned from the previous years and expanding upon it, growing in confidence and power, but also revealing her negative traits. Willow sometimes gets a pass by fans of Buffy, except for the one time she tried to end the world, but she is one of the most consistently selfish characters on the show, especially when it comes to major decisions. In Season 3, this takes the form of her cheating with Xander, and especially the aftermath once their affair is discovered. Willow is also in conflict with Buffy much more this season than in the past. In fact, all of her relationships become disrupted at one point or another, including with her mother, who is included in the show for all of one episode. Some of it's her fault, and some of it's not, but the way she resolves these conflicts is completely different from how Season 1 Willow would. Instead of fleeing or hiding, she confronts things directly, speaking openly and honestly, eventually at least. This is especially relevant when she confronts Buffy in Dead Man's Party and Bad Girls, as both lead to important character moments. One of her most critical scenes in the season is in Consequences, after it's revealed that Xander had sex with Faith. Initially, she seems stoic, even uncaring, having understood what he was implying before anyone else, a sharp contrast to her catching Xander and Cordelia kissing, which resulted in a sudden flight and outburst. Here she instead deals with things internally, weeping in the restroom afterwards. It's important to know, though, that she's not crying because of what Xander did, but instead what it represents. For the longest time, she and Xander were best friends. They shared everything. This is best shown in Grave, Season 6 finale. Then Buffy entered the picture, and it was the three of them together. For 2 years and change, they had been as close as they could be, but as time wore on, that started to change. Buffy found refuge in Angel and lied to them about his resurrection. Xander embraced Cordelia, and when that was done, ended up having sex with Faith. But none of this was shared information. Each character had their own separate life and experiences, and Willow crying is a form of grief for what is effectively her childhood, as she realizes that things will never be the same. Willow also begins to delve into magic this season, although there are elements of it previously, and I Only Have Eyes for You and Becoming Part 2. There's not any hugely impressive showings, floating a pencil here or a general charm there, but it gives her a more defined role in the Scooby Gang, allowing her to participate in combat situations in a way she had previously been afraid to. This in turn leads to Xander being the heart of the team, as he doesn't have anything supernatural to contribute. Xander has a significant year. He grows up in a number of ways, but still deals with the same fears and failures as before. He's perpetually looking for something new, something that can define him. This is exemplified in Zeppo, but it's also shown in his affair with Willow, his lust after Faith, and even his goals after high school to roam America. Despite this, there are very few positive moments for him that show his growth in burgeoning adulthood. He spends far too much time in the second half of the season bickering with Cordelia after their breakup. But in the prom, he buys her a dress after recognizing what an ass he has been. Xander does take a bit of a backseat as a character in the latter half of the season. His arc with Cordelia is done, and he doesn't have a real place in dealing with the mayor or the council. He's always there to help, but rarely offers more than that. Just like all of the high school characters, he's still trying to find his place in the world, and without a particular direction, he exists as comic relief, with the occasional bout of jealousy. Last season was about uncovering the true Giles, and learning about his backstory and seeing him be passionate, in love, and hate. This season we get to actually see a teenage Ripper in action in Band Candy, which is a solid approach that demonstrates how much he has grown as a person. It acts as a mirror to the rest of the Scooby Gang, who can see a possible future and compare it to their current lives. Aside from that, his main journey for the season begins in Helpless. Prior to that, he acts as a father figure for Buffy, and they have a few challenges, but nothing that isn't solved by the end of the episode. In Helpless, however, he is forced to poison her to deprive her of her supernatural abilities before she confronts a dangerous vampire, an ancient test from the antiquated council. He is ultimately unable to go through with it, and is fired from the council and is no longer her watcher. This is a fundamental shift, and requires the addition of a new character, Wesley. He resembles Season 1 Giles in a number of ways, so again there is the past/future mirror presented. Giles is much older and wiser, however, and unfortunately Wesley is generally the butt of the joke, worse in every aspect. Despite no longer being an official watcher, Giles still has his place as a librarian and a source of knowledge, with the loss of identity only really coming into play next season. It's clear that Giles is still dealing with the traumatic events from last year, the murder of Miss Calendar and his torture, so is in general more reserved and cautious. There are still some fun moments, but ultimately he remains a background presence, warm and welcoming, but not a major player. Angel is brought back only a few episodes into the season, first as a bestial creature, but returning to his normal self after a few weeks of recuperation. His role is basically to present Buffy with happiness, a positive relationship and presence, then to take it away due to the inherent conflict in being with a 200-year-old vampire. His best episode by far is Amends, which delves into his backstory in a way that Becoming Part 1 wishes it could have. It features actually good, if melodramatic, acting from Boreanaz, who doesn't really find his footing until a couple of seasons into his own show, Angel. Because half of last season was Angel's storyline, it's effectively guaranteed it won't happen this season, and it doesn't. Unfortunately, this removes most of the tension from the character, and the will they or won't they with Buffy never feels the same. He does offer some good dramatic beats early on with Buffy, Faith, and Giles, but once he slips back into his generic role, the interest fades away. Cordelia moves away from the main cast after she breaks up with Xander, mostly offering drive-by insults, but there are a few moments that she shows her depths. In Helpless, she drives Buffy home without a second thought, and in the prom after her family loses everything, she still shows drive and will, though will become increasingly relevant in Angel. She also stakes her first vampire in the finale, which is a fun moment. Oz is luckily here for the entire season, and he is too good for the world. He gets cheated on by Willow, but forgives her out of love, although he still takes his time and makes sure she is really ready for every step of the relationship. Seth Green has always had great delivery for the comic lines, and the occasional moments of drama, like in Beauty and the Beasts. He doesn't have much of an arc, mostly just being supportive boyfriend guy, but maybe that's all he needs to be. An always welcome presence that stands up for the concept of good, even in an alternate reality. The biggest new addition to the cast is Faith. After Kendra was killed at the end of last season, Faith was called, gaining her Slayer powers. She was originally living in Boston, but after her watcher was killed, she fled to Sunnydale and joined up with the Scoobies. Faith is very much a character of contrasts. She presents a tough exterior, hardened by a difficult life, but it's really a mask for the fear that she feels on an almost constant basis. People who suffer trauma often freeze in that stage of development, and with an alcoholic mother and an absent father, she is unable to grow out of her childish beliefs. Despite this, she shares a number of similarities with Buffy, and that's part of her purpose in the story. She is a what-if version of the character, something that is shown literally in The Wish, where Buffy in a slightly different circumstances becomes a cold, hardened badass just like Faith, or what Faith wants to be. Faith is arguably the largest arc in the season. Initially, she ingratiates herself with the group, becoming quick friends with all of them, but there's still a distance, and there's pushback from both sides. There are moments where it seems like she's getting closer, especially to Buffy, but ultimately she's an outsider to the rest, without the same kind of history. In other words, it's hard to be the new kid. This eventually causes her to go to the mayor, the big bad of the season, and for likely the first time in her life, she feels loved. Her relationship with the mayor is abusive, transactional, and ultimately built on violence, but there's real caring and passion in it. It ties back to the themes of being a child, where Faith finally gets the father she always wanted, and she will do anything for him to retain that feeling. It's a real shame that Giles couldn't be that for her, and arguably, he didn't even try. He's Buffy's father figure, and it seems like a big failing that he didn't offer some sort of olive branch to Faith. She might have rejected it out of hand, but the offer could have made a difference. This very idea is demonstrated when Angel talks to her after she accidentally kills a man, but then Wesley goes and fucks it all up. Faith's arc with the mayor would be interesting no matter what, as betrayal stories often are, but his personality is where it really sets it apart. He's the definition of an affable villain, someone who is just happy to be alive, and he conducts death warrants in the same way he does a PTA meeting. He had a checklist for the day that involves becoming indestructible. He's such a contrast from Angelus and Spike, who were completely driven by desires. The entire town of Sunnydale was built over 100 years ago so that he could become a demon. That's long-term planning, the ego to their id. There's also a good degree of depth to his character. The minor touches for how he shows affection to Faith really drive home that he loves her in a show, not tell way. His germ phobia and little moments of excitement make him feel more human, and they help highlight the times when he's really evil, like when he tries to strangle Buffy. The happy facade is such a brilliant touch on a character who would kill children without a second thought, and he is definitely in contention for the best big bad of all 7 seasons. Or 10 or 15, depending on how you count. Without further ado, let's begin with the episodes. Anne is a brilliant pilot, which takes immediate efforts to show the impacts of last season. Buffy is really gone, having created a whole new life in LA as a waitress, with a crappy apartment and lecherous customers. First, though, we see the impact it has had on her friends, as they attempt to stake a vampire in a way that mirrors early episodes in Season 1. It establishes that Buffy's absence is a huge weight on all of them, and there's a good bit of comedy with Oz throwing the stake. More Oz this season is always a big plus. After that, there's a dream sequence with Angel and Buffy on an idyllic beach. Dreams are used frequently in Buffy to foretell major events, and this is most true in her relationship with Angel. In this case, he says that he will never leave, not even if she kills him. The obvious implication is that Buffy can't let go of her past, no matter how far she runs. It then cuts from the dream to her crappy apartment, and the stark contrast shows all that she has lost. Even the colors in LA are subdued, highlighting the difference between Sunnydale. The episode cuts between the two locations, emphasizing that neither Buffy nor the Scooby Gang are dealing with the situation. Giles is running off after every lead, but to little success. Joyce and Giles have a very intense, adult conversation where she understandably gets upset that a whole portion of Buffy's life was hidden away from her, and he, as the adult, chose that. There are understandable reasons for it, but it's a hard situation, and without Buffy there to mediate, there is no resolution. The relationship between the two parental figures in Buffy's life is explored a few times throughout the season, and offers good development for both. A remnant from Buffy's past, Lily finds her in LA. She was a vampire worshipper last season, and appears in a total of 5 episodes spread throughout Buffy and Angel. Here she is destitute, homeless with her boyfriend Ricky. Unfortunately, he disappears, and she runs to the one person she knows has helped her before. Initially, Buffy tries to stay out of it, but her nature takes over, and she begins investigating. There's a fairly solid mystery in this episode, with a character introduced early on as a social worker turning out to be a demon, working with the local blood center. All these elements are built up beforehand, which makes the reveal feel earned. It also touches on some deeper themes, though it's a light touch, with elements of addiction, homelessness, and poverty alluded to. This is also Buffy who doesn't have time for subtlety, smashing phones and taking names. Later variations of this theme are seen in Faith and Wish vs. Buffy. She's then forced into hell, and the set and theme design are both very solid, with a Hellraiser-type aesthetic. There's no time for delay, and Buffy immediately starts a fight, killing a number of demons and leading to a workers' revolution with a hammer and a sickle, a shot that would make its way into the intro for future episodes. Lily sees her example and is able to seize the initiative, pushing the head demon off the platform. While Buffy as the leader is a concept not followed up until much later in the show, this is an early seed for it. After they escape, and Buffy gives up the end role, the apartment is shot much lighter, and there is an element of hope where before there was just despair. The episode ends in a wordless reunion between Buffy and her mom, which is great, as we as the audience don't need to know exactly what was said. It's the best introduction to the season that we could have asked for, and with all the major themes touched on, a sense of identity, lies, and relationships. These are shown both in Sunnydale and LA, and overall it's fantastically done. The only negative is a slightly cheesy montage of homeless people, but it's a minor misstep in an otherwise perfect episode, and definitely the best season opener of the show. Dead Man's Party is next, and it's unfortunately a large step down. The central conflict of the episode is that everyone is upset with Buffy for leaving, but instead of talking to her about it, they avoid the situation, and it all blows up at a party. There are also zombies, but those feel like an afterthought, and are missing the thematic links that are often present with the Monster of the Week. Buffy is an awkward reunion with everyone, although Giles is the only one who seems to be purely positive, as he understands what she went through, and wants to give her time and space. The others, and they are teenagers which should be considered, instead of a big old party, all the while avoiding any and all emotions. Buffy is all set to leave again, as throughout the episode she has felt unwanted. This causes Willow, then her mom, and then Xander to all argue with her, assaulting her from all sides. It's a miserable experience for Buffy, and one that could have been avoided. There are reasonable points in there, but there's a way to do this episode that doesn't feel as mean-spirited. And Xander's self-righteous monologue puts it way over the top. Then the zombies break in, all the emotional stuff is forgotten as they deal with the impending death. Somehow the action solves all their problems, and everyone is back to being okay in the next episode, which is unfulfilling. Ultimately, Dead Man's Party makes Buffy feel bad all throughout, and the audience is in her shoes, so they also feel bad. The zombies feel tacked on, which is often the case for the lesser Buffy episodes. Faith, Hope, and Trick is next, and introduces some fairly major characters in, surprisingly, Faith and Mr. Trick. Trick as a character is a decent idea, a modern vampire who pulls strings, but he is ultimately a bit disappointing. He's not particularly intimidating or funny, and in the end, the mayor fulfills the affable role much better. Trick also lives for a surprisingly long time, until Consequences, a bit over halfway through the season. Despite this, he's only in 5 episodes, making his role as a secondary villain feel even more pointless. I think he's fine for a 1 or 2 episode arc, but for major villain for a decent portion of the season, he's lacking. Faith, on the other hand, comes out kicking. The episode takes its time to introduce her, but when it does, it's impactful. She has a big personality, and everyone except Buffy is immediately taken by it. Her flaws are shown too, however, beating on a vampire while ignoring Buffy's peril, and then when the twist comes, her weaknesses are highlighted, with a childlike regression and deep-seated fears that haunt her throughout the entire show. Kakistos is a solid villain, and offers a reasonable threat, even if it's just this one episode. While he doesn't do much thematically, he shows off the real Faith, which is necessary for the audience to really understand her. There are a lot of little touches that make Faith feel like a real person. The way she eats at Buffy's indicate that food was a scarcity growing up, and she has to devour it quickly before it's gone. While her abusive childhood is discussed later, this is a good early example. Her living in a motel is similarly revealing, as she doesn't seek to establish a permanent place, accepting that she's going to leave at some point. It's a sharp contrast to the warm home of Buffy. There's also a very solid B-plot with Giles and Buffy, as he quizzes her about exactly how Angel died. The whole thing is a lie, again the theme of the season, but he wants her to come to terms with what happened at her own pace, prodding but not pestering. It's one more show of his love and care for her, and the scene at the end where she reveals what really happened is a great show of acting, and a real positive step forward for Buffy, who can finally move on. Of course, Angel will be back next episode, but there's closure for a brief time. Next is the Dr. Jekyll episode, completing the old school horror icons. It's one of the less subtle Buffy episodes, with metaphors that just become text, as the abusive boyfriend becomes a literal monster, but it still works. There's also movement forward for Buffy's romantic relationships, as she starts dating Scott. He's been featured a few times before, but it's awkward and only lasts for a few episodes, so it's more of a blip on her life, a half step forward. Again, this episode has a big focus on lies, especially the lies people tell to themselves. Buffy says she is totally over Angel. Debbie lies about how Pete loves her, and it's her fault that he is abusive. Then Angel comes back, and although Buffy runs into him, she doesn't say anything, trying to deal with everything on her own. Overall, the episode is one of the more mediocre Monster of the Weeks, but it's not bad and has a decent amount of character work, just not particularly memorable either. The best part of the episode is the large amount of Oz, who has to temporarily deal with the idea that he killed someone, a heavy cross to bear. Willow also has a Scooby-Doo lunchbox, which is an amusing meta reference. Homecoming is next, and again it's one of the weaker episodes of the season, but there are strong thematic components that make it worthwhile. It begins with Buffy lying to Scott, and him dumping her. Like I said, it's a brief romantic arc. The big focus this episode is on identity, with Buffy running for prom queen, or equivalent, and Cordelia running against her. Unfortunately, this is also the start of the Willow Xander cheating arc, and due to this they abandon Buffy to help Cordy, for like the third time in 4 episodes. They get better as the season progresses, but it's a bit of a rough start. The highlight of the episode is Faith, with some sapphic references already, her inviting Buffy out to a night of fun. Faith is also the first to figure out something is wrong, as well as to take a fun dig at Scott for ditching Buffy, and overall is a much better friend than the rest of the gang. Cordelia also does some good work with this episode, especially once Slayer Fest started, where she is forced to dodge all variety of assassins with Buffy, and even talks the stupid cowboy vampire into running away. There's also a fun bit of visual imagery, with Cordelia in a green dress and Buffy in red, representing wrath and envy. Overall, Homecoming is a mixed bag, with too much focus on the competition for Homecoming Queen, and not enough on the hunt for Slayers that occurs in the last act, which in itself is fairly goofy. Still, there's good character stuff for Cordy and Faith, and it's in the upper half of Buffy episodes, just low for season 3. Band Candy is a fun little romp that helps develop characters and themes while allowing for new perspectives on old characters. It's also excellently paced, moving from scene to scene without wasting any time. It almost feels like an episode in a rush to get to the adults as teenagers part, but that's what viewers watching also want, so it works out. One of the cores of the episode is lying, specifically Buffy's lies to her mother, and Giles about where she's going, and when she's secretly spending time with the resurrected Angel. She wants to keep him all to herself, and is afraid that by revealing him to the gang, there might be trouble. It's also about obsessive love, just like Beauty and the Beasts. Buffy's relationship with Angel is destroying her other relationships, and her behavior has a mirror shined on it when the remainder of the town becomes teenagers, just like her. There's some good lines from Giles and Joyce here about her treatment of them, and there's a solid emotional discussion about her responsibilities, and the pressure put on her as the Slayer. Giles also says, "I'm not your parent" to her, but in every way but blood, he is. The parental love will be stretched to the breaking point in Helpless, but for now it's a showcase of how different teenage Giles is in his current life, and thus asks questions about all the group growing up. Thematically, it's a great episode, but there are some negatives. Not all of the comedy works, and there is a lot of it. If Snyder's snivelly goblin mode doesn't do it for you, this episode is going to be awful to watch. There's also the continuation of the Xander Willow plot, including romantic music for their cheating, which is just ugly, and the final resolution is a bit lackluster, with Ethan escaping again. Still, the greater ideas are good enough to carry the episode. Revelations is next, and it's a very solid episode with a good exploration of Buffy and Faith's relationship. The episode literally begins with the lyrics, "You know, I never lied." Buffy is never subtle, but the themes are out in force here. Similarly, Buffy is not dating Faith, but there's a whole lot of subtext. It's not quite as much as Bad Girls, but there's definitely something going on, at least on Faith's end. Faith's new watcher, Miss Gwendolyn Post, is instantly hateable, insulting Giles and in general being the pompous British ass that Giles once was. She also pits Faith against the Scoobies, just as there was starting to be a connection. Throughout the season, there are moments where it seems like Faith might be making friends or having a real relationship, but every time it's dashed away. That's part of the real tragedy of her character, and what makes her so uniquely compelling. Just a single action or word, and everything could have been different. She even defends Giles to Miss Post, but as Post is the villain of the episode, she naturally says whatever is nastiest. It's a solid twist, her being an ex-watcher gone mad with power, and there are enough hints early on that something is off that it feels earned. There's also an interesting storytelling decision where the audience learns of her trickery, but the other characters learn slowly, causing much drama. Most of the time in Buffy, everyone's on the same side, but here there is division amongst the rank. Of course, storyline-wise, the most significant event is Angel's resurrection being revealed, and Buffy's deception. The gang, and especially Giles, are understandably hurt, and react in different ways. Xander acts as a jealous avenger, getting Faith to help kill the vampire, or try to. Willow is accepting due to her own guilt over cheating, and Giles is more disappointed than anything, also bashed in the head again, which is commented can't be good for his health. The conclusion, with Miss Post acquiring the arm, has pretty decent effects for the show, and with some nice purple fire and lightning bolts, and a solid death effect after Buffy cuts off her arm with a bit of thrown glass, which is a ridiculously impressive feat. After that bit of action though, there is a crucial final scene with Buffy and Faith. There's some interesting color theory stuff, Buffy wearing a yellow sweater over a dark dress, with light hair and accessories. She's the righteous and good one, but there are elements of violence and evil too. Faith on the other hand wears light clothes, a brown shirt and denim jeans, but has dark hair, and noticeable bruises on her face from the previous fight with Buffy. Faith pushes her away, feeling betrayed and alone, but while she puts on a brave face, the final shot presents her as a vulnerable child, small in a big room, all alone. Revelations is the first great episode since the pilot, but it's the start of a turn in the season. Almost every episode after this point is great or better, with some reaching the peak of Buffy episodes. They have poignant character work, solid action and mystery, and good progression in the story. It's just so good. Lover's Walk is a similarly strong episode, with both the reintroduction of Spike and the ending of the Willow Xander side plot. Spike works perfectly as an agent of chaos here, a mix of dangerous and pathetic, whereas next season he leans far too much into the latter. He forces confrontation of characters, calling out the absurdity of the Buffy-Angel relationship, and forcing Willow into a desperate situation. He also has a fun scene with Joyce, which is a relationship that's not explored a huge amount, but adds a bit of humanity to him. As we see in future seasons, he was always a bit of a mama's boy. In this episode, the theme of love hurts is at the forefront. Buffy and Angel, Spike and Drusilla, Xander and Willow, they all have huge issues caused by their relationships, although they are all distinct. Buffy has created her own world, one where she finally sees a future with Angel. As Joyce mentions later in the season, however, that's a fantasy. Angel is a vampire, and he'll never grow old, have kids, or even go out in daylight. Of course, 2 of those 3 things happen in the Angel show, but it's the spirit of the thing. Spike, on the other hand, is caused to go back to Sunnydale by Drusilla breaking up with him. He was seen as weak in her eyes, from his failures in teaming up with Buffy. His love causes the destructive streak that begins this episode, and in his drunken rage, he's fairly intimidating. He kidnaps Willow, kills a shop girl, and breaks Xander's arm. He represents the fury and anger that romance can bring. Xander and Willow, on the other hand, are relishing in their selfish affair. They haven't faced any consequences for their actions until Spike arrives. He brings them together physically, causing Oz and Cordelia to stumble upon them in a very effective scene. Cordelia's line, "Oh God," and her final line for the episode both show Charisma's acting chops, and actually treat the affair with an appropriate amount of seriousness. Spike's final monologue to Angel and Buffy about how they'll be in love until it kills them both is a fitting description of many of Buffy's worst relationships, and sets the stage for the end of the season. Also fun is Spike immediately giving up the location where he stashed the gang, the exact first thought that Buffy had. At the end, he is really the only one who had a good time and made out well. Just like the end of the musical episode, really. The Wish is next, an interesting alternate reality episode. However, before that, there's still a good deal of relationship fallout to deal with. Xander is trying to pin the blame on anything and everything but himself, although there's some indication he doesn't believe what he's saying. Willow, on the other hand, immediately goes back to Oz and puts her own needs above his, or anyone else's. Both characters come off quite badly, which makes the main plot of this episode, The Wish, an interesting direction to go. In AU Sunnydale, Xander and Willow died and are now vampires, so the characters we have just been hating have suddenly been turned into monstrous demons, sort of personifying what the audience thinks of them. The whole idea is that Buffy never came to Sunnydale, so the Master has risen. He's a bit better here than his Season 1 appearances, although still pretty cheesy. In a bold choice, Cordelia is killed at the end of the second act, and Buffy has to come and try to save the day. Sarah does her best at being a hard-ass, and they've tried with muted costuming and a scar, but ultimately it just doesn't work that well. Even in her most dire moments, like Anne or Season 6, she's still Buffy, but here she's trying to be someone else, and it really feels like play acting. The final fight scene is neat, and a bunch of characters are killed off without ceremony, one of the common features of alternate realities. We also get to see Giles' belief in good shine through, as he smashes the MacGuffin at the end, believing that whatever's on the other side, it'll be better than what he's dealing with. A lot of people are big on this episode, but for me it ranks as an above-average monster of the week, not the best Buffy has to offer. Amends, however, this is in my top 5 episodes in all seasons. I love the Christmas aesthetic, I like the first evil, and the final scene always gets me. All of this despite the fact that it's an angel-heavy episode with a huge focus on backstory. It's sort of a Becoming Part 1, but done well. I think the big difference is it asks questions instead of just dumping exposition. Should Angel be punished for the past demon's actions? Does he deserve the redemption he's been given? Aside from the angel stuff, there's also further development on the personal relationships. Cordelia has gone back to her antagonistic ways, which is fair enough, and Oz has a mature discussion with Willow. Ultimately, he takes her back, as love wins out, but it's still a bit bittersweet. She pushes him to move forward with the relationship, offering sex, but it's the same as in Season 2, when she wanted to kiss him to make Xander jealous. She pushes for physical intimacy not because it's the right time, but for external reasons. Again, he pushes her away, because he is the mature one in the relationship. Faith is also back, having been absent for a few episodes. Buffy is forced to invite her to Christmas dinner, which she declines with a bullshit excuse. Again, the themes of lies come through, as Faith immediately understands it was Joyce's idea to invite her, and the offer feels disingenuous coming from Buffy. Despite that, she shows up, even bringing gifts. That flies in the face of her previous excuse, but it's accepted by all parties. Ultimately, Faith just wants a family, to have friends and to be loved, and it's nice that she gets at least a few moments of that. Buffy is introduced to the first evil this episode, brought about by some monks that she can beat up. However, it's one of the first things that she actually can't fight, as defeating the monsters doesn't actually help Angel, and she has to talk him down from suicide. The first is used as a few different things, but here it works as a metaphor for depression, a theme that is expanded on greatly in Season 6. The scene on the hilltop is David's finest acting, as he begs Buffy to let him die, to accept him for the monster he believes he is. Am I a righteous man? It's the same conflict that everyone deals with, weighing up past mistakes and actions, and wondering if they're still a good person, or whether their life is worth something. Ultimately, a higher power answers here, bringing a freak snowstorm to Sunnydale, allowing for White Christmas. I can't help but feel something as the pair walk through the snowy streets, wondering what their future will be. It's just perfect. The whole episode is. It's really a great send-off for Angel. The only slight problem with the episode is its placement in the season, as it might have been best just before prom, around 17 or 18. Gingerbread, on the other hand, is certainly one of the lesser episodes of the season. That's not to say it's bad, it's just sandwiched in the middle of an incredible string of episodes, and in comparison it looks worse. Despite this, there are a few good things to say. The inciting incident is Joyce helping Buffy in her patrols, then discovering 2 dead kids. This causes a huge uproar, with the entire town having a vigil, a protest group, and even a witch-burning mob. However, throughout the show we see dozens of people killed and nothing happens. 2 white kids die though, and everyone is up in arms. It turns out this is because of the influence of a demon, but taken as wider commentary, it still works. This episode is also the first and only appearance of Willow's mom. She's clearly completely out of sync with Willow, not noticing her haircut for months, or the fact that she is a boyfriend. Although it's rarely brought up again, it's interesting that none of the gang aside from Buffy have a supportive home life, again drawing parallels to Faith. There's not a single big issue with the episode, rather it's a bunch of small things. The angry mob is a bit too eager to start fires and kidnap their own kids, and the whole thing reminds me of Halloween Kills. We get what they're trying to say, but it's too avaricious. The demon ending is a bit of a cop-out, explaining the earlier behavior but also stepping on the side of the moral issues. The events of the episode also feel disconnected, as they're not brought up again, making the whole thing feel a bit pointless. As stated previously, it's not awful, just not great. Helpless, however, is an amazing episode that showcases Buffy's strength, builds on the mythology, and delves deeper into Giles and Buffy's relationship. For the first time, Buffy's actual strength is challenged, and she almost loses to a common vampire. This idea is revisited in Fool for Love, but for now she goes to Giles, afraid there is something seriously wrong. He dismisses those concerns, and it's revealed that he is hypnotizing her, then poisoning her at the request of the council. This is such a betrayal not only for Buffy, but also the audience. It's even more devastating as she had just asked him to be her dad, taking her to the ice capades as a replacement for her absent biological father. When his deception is revealed, it almost breaks Buffy, and Cordelia of all people has to rescue her. She does so without question, revealing her true character, but it's a terribly sad moment. Buffy then has to confront a villain of the episode, a mad vampire. He's genuinely scary, which is impressive considering how vampires are often fodder in the show. It's shown that he's particularly brutal and violent, the camera even shying away from showing the mess that he caused. Adding additional tension is that he kidnaps her mom, leaving photographs in a way that resembles Angelus's drawings from last season. Buffy wears a red cloak and carries a bag of goodies as she goes to confront him. She's not afraid of the big bad wolf, however, and manages to trick him, showing that it's not just her slayer abilities that give her strength, but her natural aptitudes. The end of the episode has one more shock, as it's revealed that while she passed the test, Giles did not, and he's fired from the council. The final shot has him caring for Buffy, showing that no matter what, he'll be there for her. Next is the Zeppo, a Xander-focused episode. Despite this, it's one of the best monsters of the week of the season. There's an apocalypse going on, filled with drama, research, and a fight with an eldritch abomination, but we don't see any of it. Instead, we follow Xander, as he deals with his own little zombie plot, with occasional glimpses of the main one. This is such a unique way to present an episode, and the change-up is very welcomed. The episode starts with Willow using her magic in battle for the first time, something that happens with increasing frequency over the seasons. Xander is hurt, and Buffy wants him to sit out the next adventure, as he's the only one without special knowledge or powers. To that end, he fetches snacks for the group, but is put on the sidelines when the actual events happen. While trying to be a rebel and a car guy, he bumps into Jack O'Toole, some sort of necromancer. He gets recruited as the driver, and they head around to different cemeteries raising the dead. This is a bit at odds with how zombies are depicted in another part of the series, but it could be a different method or require special circumstances, so it's not a big deal. There are a few good character scenes that Xander walks in on, including an extremely melodramatic argument between Buffy and Angel, having sex with Faith, and Willow at the magic shop. Each offers a bit of insight on the characters, but then we bounce away to another event. It's like 22 short films about Springfield, a collection of interconnected tales. The final confrontation of the episode also shows why Xander and Cordelia got together, as they both have a sheer stubborn will no matter the circumstances. It's also a good bit of tension, a change from the relatively slapstick tone of the rest of the episode. That's often what Buffy is, swapping between comedy, drama, and horror, all within 10 minutes. Even the final moments of the scene are a bit of black humor, as Oz, in werewolf form, eats O'Toole. Overall, the episode is great, and while it doesn't progress the main plot, that really begins next episode. It offers a good viewpoint on how everyone is doing, the roles in the group, and foreshadows what will happen next. Bad Girls explores the Buffy and Faith relationship in far more detailed way than has been done before, albeit with slightly clumsy characterization on Buffy's sides. It also features a greater focus on the mayor, the big bad of the season. He's been in a few scenes before, but now his plans are revealed, and his affable nature takes center stage. This is also the introduction to Wesley, the replacement for Giles. He's a younger, more magnified version, even more stuffy and pretentious, with less combat ability. He's treated with suspicion by Buffy, but completely dismissed by Faith, who has better things to do than listen to an authority figure. He offers an exposition dump about the villain of the episode, Balthazar, a disgustingly fat demon who has an attendant set of night vampires. Overall, I really like his design, and he's a fun challenge for the two slayers. The main focus of the episode is definitely Buffy and Faith, though. It begins with them fighting, while simultaneously having a discussion about sex and love. After Faith runs out on the Watchers, Buffy chases after her, and she's referred to as a girlfriend. Faith relishes talking about violence, something which she passes on to Buffy, who goes into great detail discussing with Xander and Willow, before ditching to hang out with Faith, who lures her with the heart in the window. Then dance with each other at a club, basically ignoring the boys who dance with them. Buffy also wears dark clothes here, emulating Faith. They then go on a little expedition, and do a bit of light crime together, all Thelma and Louise. The cops catch them, but Faith and the little rascal she is says ACAB, and they crash the cop car, escaping. Buffy is starting to have doubts about her relationship. Despite this, she declines Willow's invitation to help, and goes solely with Faith. That's when the big moment of the episode comes. After a brief fight with vampires, Faith accidentally stabs the mayor's assistant, a character we had just begun to root for. The moment after, with Faith panicking, and Buffy trying desperately to stop his death, is incredible, with so many emotions conveyed in a short time. Faith, like a child, immediately runs away, claiming it's not her fault. She returns to the body later, and again it seems like she doesn't really understand what she's done, putting a tentative hand on the wound, a befuddled expression on her face. After that, there's a fine action scene where Wesley proves his ineptitude, and the day is saved, but it definitely feels like a scene that had to happen, rather than the one we wanted to see. The important scene comes after, as the mayor offers both a timeline, 100 days, and displays his immortality, creating a credible threat. Next, Buffy and Faith have a frank discussion about what happened, Faith claiming she doesn't care. It's shown over and over this is a lie, and while she doesn't face the full weight of her action until Angel Season 1, Almost everything she does for the rest of the season is predicated on this one mistake, and not only her response, but those around her. Consequences, understandably, is all about this event. It begins, as many episodes do, with a dream. Buffy is drowning with the weight of a secret, just like Faith tossed the body into the ocean. Here those ideas are manifest. Cordelia is then introduced to Wesley, with a quasi-romantic arc that lasts the remainder of the season. While Giles dismissively offers that she's a student, Charisma was 28 or 29 when they filmed it, about 5 years younger than Wesley's actor. In-universe it's still quite creepy, but on camera it doesn't seem unreasonable. He also claims to be the commander of the Slayers, but they offer him no respect, as he's earned none. His actions this episode also show that he's woefully unprepared for the job that he's been saddled with. Faith and Buffy have another conversation about her killings, and it's clear that she's terrified of facing consequences, even of owning up to what she did. She says it's Buffy's fault as much as her own, and they can't both go down. Buffy is left disheartened and afraid. She turns to Willow, but as a consequence of the last episode, she is distant and heads off to live her own life. It's good that Buffy's actions have impact, and scorning her friends wasn't just resolved cleanly. Faith and Buffy continue to do investigations and have drama-filled conversations, and the entire time Faith keeps her mask up, terrified that if she lowers her guard, even for a second, everything will come tumbling down. What she says in the argument is not entirely wrong though. Slayers were built to kill, and they were up thousands on the saved versus killed column. She views it as a matter of statistics, and Buffy can't accept even one innocent's death. There are valid points on both sides, even if Faith is deep down denial. Buffy realizes she has to tell someone, and due to her falling out with Angel, she goes to Willow. Willow here is wearing childlike clothes, overalls with a colorful shirt, something that she's been doing less and less as the season progresses. Here she represents innocence, and a completely different life than what Faith offers. After a brief discussion and cry with Willow, she goes to Giles, but Faith has already been there, telling the teacher, blaming Buffy entirely for it. Giles demonstrates his knowledge and love for Buffy by seeing through Faith's lies, and the gang goes to work, trying to figure out how to help her. Xander claims he knows her best due to them having sex, but Buffy actually does know her, and tells him that she doesn't respect people like him. Despite this, he charges on ahead, trying to bring Faith to the light side. She refuses his help and sexually assaults him, before being knocked out by Angel. He talks with her, killer to killer, and actually seems to be making a sort of breakthrough. Again, the path between the right and wrong is so narrow. One choice, one word can make a huge difference, and Faith genuinely seems to be considering trying to be good. Then Wesley arrives and does the absolute wrong thing, taking her in chains to the Watchers' Council, a group of old men wanting to control her. Faith breaks out, as the council is perpetually incompetent, and Buffy and Faith have a last conversation, where they could be on the same side. It doesn't last though, as vampires ambush them, and in the end Faith saves Buffy, killing Mr. Trick. Good riddance to a bad character. This again shows the inherent conflict in Faith, who could have left her to die, but chose not to. Again, the season is about choices, and at the very end she chooses to go to the mayor and offer her services. It's a great twist that sets up the rest of the season well. Consequences is all about interpersonal drama, and the choices people make after a significant event. There are a number of important choices that happen this episode. Faith breaking bad, Giles sticking by Buffy, Wesley using the council like a cudgel, and Angel offering an olive branch. Each have long-reaching consequences. Doppelgangland is next, and it's a solid Willow-focused episode that progresses the main story enough to not feel tangential. It's got a few good scenes with Faith and the mayor, as she is able to embrace her new apartment and act like the kid that she is. He, on the other hand, gets to be a father again, something he likely hasn't experienced for a century or so. There's about a 15-minute build-up of Willow feeling bad. She feels like a doormat, the same old Willow from season 1, unable to have fun like Faith or be courageous like Buffy. To that end, her vampire clone from the Wish arrives in Sunnydale after a failed spell by Anya, and she's forced to confront her darker side. Allison is definitely better at the bad girl persona than Sarah is, and the episode is a lot of fun with moments with the acting for 2 gimmick. In the end, Willow gains more confidence, which is sort of a repeat of the last Halloween, and is able to trick some vampires and Anya, at least for a little while. In the end, they send Vamp Willow back to her own reality, instead of just staking her, which is an odd choice but fits with the whole human element. Plus, who cares about other realities? Enemies begins with Angel and Buffy's relationship taking center stage, both lying to each other about the future. There's some more sapphic comments between Faith and Buffy, keeping her warm for you, etc., and we get more information about the mayor's ascension, with a demon dealing in cold hard cash. Faith kills him, further proving her fall to the dark side, and takes his MacGuffin books. She goes to Angel and tries to seduce him, but he only has eyes for Buffy. Despite her ultimate goal, it seems there was some sincerity about what she was saying, feeling bad about killing, and the path she's taking. It's just that the mayor's side had dental. The main deal of this episode is then revealed, with the mayor hiring a shaman to de-soul Angel. He then fakes not having a soul to learn what Faith and the mayor knows. Then Faith is really on the outs from the group. Ultimately, the ending is a bit of a cop-out, with Giles personally knowing the shaman, but the magic in Buffy often is, so I think it works. Ultimately, this is one of the more lackluster episodes in the second half, moving the plot along, but without a good central character core. There are a few good moments, some Giles snark, and a bit of the mayor's abusive tendencies revealed, but it's missing the gooey center that almost all the others have. Earshot, on the other hand, is an incredible episode, but first we've got to talk about the element in the room. The episode was originally scheduled to air on April 27, 1999. 1 week before that, however, Columbine happened. An episode about a school shooter including lines such as, "School shootings are bordering on trendy," and "Who hasn't thought about taking everyone out?" was considered a bit too far, especially given the target audience. So it was instead released in September of 99, about a month before Season 4 began. The major focus of the episode is not the shooting, however, but telepathy, an aspect of a demon that is given to Buffy when she kills it. Prior to this, she was being left out and isolated, still dealing with the fallout of Faith abandoning her. Once she gets the power, initially she is overjoyed, demonstrating it in a classroom scene which uses analysis of Shakespeare as an analysis of the show as a whole, which is a bit of meta fun. In the end, though, she is unable to control it, and it begins to quickly take over her life. She hears everyone's thoughts at once, including someone saying they want to kill everyone. From there, the rest of the group has to investigate while she is bedridden. The episode strikes a good balance of comedy and drama, with the best moment being Cordelia skipping through the boring parts and directly asking a teacher whether he's going to murder everyone for the school paper. There's also a good amount of continuity nods, with Larry being openly gay, references to band candy and Doppelgangland, and overall this episode highlights the strides all the characters have made this season. All of this builds up to a final confrontation between Buffy and Jonathan, a recurring background character who's finally given his spotlight. It's an open and honest distillation of the whole high school experience, and smartly there's no music for the entire sequence, just two people and a gun. While this episode literally gave Buffy the ability to read minds, she didn't need it to say what she did to Jonathan, and it's a big part of her character, and her strength. Empathy. The only thing missing in Earshot is Faith in the Mayor, but as a standalone episode, it's phenomenal, and there's definitely a place for those, even as close to the end of the season as we are. The messages still hold up, and the comments about school shootings are sadly still relevant, maybe more than ever. Choices, however, is all about the mayor. It starts by showing how his and Faith's relationship has progressed, and highlights a big issue with it, namely that it's transactional. She does something wrong, he'll take things from her. Otherwise, she gets a cookie and a present, the most maul-ended knife imaginable. A major focus of this episode is on Buffy's relationship with Angel and her potential future. This has been a constant refrain, but now she's gotten accepted to colleges, and is presented with a chance to move away, to do something with her life. She lies to her mom about having to stay on Keeper Slayer duties, but as the audience knows, it's Angel that's keeping her stuck. Just like Buffy is a sticking point for Faith, causing her to withdraw as soon as the mayor mentions her, Faith is so desperately wanting the life that Buffy had, with friends, a boyfriend, and loving parents, and after being unable to get it, she rebelled, and is trying to convince herself she never wanted those things. Faith is a character of constant conflict, what she wants, what she needs, and how she acts, always out of harmony, and that's what makes her interesting. Back to the episode though, the Scoobies decide to go on the offensive, breaking into City Hall and stealing the mayor's box. This is the first time we see him actually angry, and it's a frightening sight. He only does it a few times, but it shows that behind the affable demeanor, he's a bigger monster than any they faced. Willow gets kidnapped, and again shows her development, using magic to stake a vampire and stealing pages from the Book of Ascension. One of the things the show is best at is actually developing the characters and keeping that consistent, at least for the first 5 seasons. The final big scene of the episode is the hostage exchange, and it's really well done. It's not just a moment of dramatic tension, but the mayor uses the opportunity to taunt Buffy and the group, and make some bitingly accurate comments about her relationship. He's been through it on Angel's side before, and he knows more than anyone how it feels. Taunts with a heaping dose of truth are the most effective, and it has long-reaching consequences. The actual final scene of the episode is Buffy and Angel on a grave, lying to each other about their futures, how what the mayor said wasn't true, and everything's going to be okay. There are a few moments that encapsulate the season theme so well, but this one has it all. The future, self-deception, relationships, and death. A perfect way to end the episode. The Prom is a relatively average episode that's carried by a key scene in the end, as well as a few good character moments. It begins with Angel and Buffy having a lovely scene where they discuss normal relationship things and appreciate each other's company. This is basically the last time it happens in the show. It then cuts to Anya, the previously vengeance demon, now a high schooler flunking math. Anya is consistently entertaining and joins as part of the main cast next season, being a highlight for the remainder of the show. Joyce then has a one-on-one conversation with Angel. She says basically the same things as the mayor, that Buffy deserves a normal, happy life, and she can never have that with Angel. This time Angel actually has the prophetic dream instead of Buffy, as he dreams of their wedding, but when they reach the sunlight, Buffy's the one who burns. Due to his concerns, he breaks up with Buffy, although it's been a long time coming. Sarah offers some wonderful acting in this episode, with an outpouring of the understandable grief. Despite this, she still has a job to do, and sets out to stop the monster of the week, a pack of hellhounds. It's kind of a dull plot, not offensive or disrupting the emotional stuff, but not that interesting, with a boring motivation, greeter design, and conclusion. Still at the end of the prom, Buffy is given the Class Protector Award, and that makes it all worth it. Jonathan gives a speech about how much she did for the whole class, which is particularly meaningful after Earshot. It's hard not to get emotional in a moment that sums up so much of the series, in a way that makes all the pain and suffering that Buffy has been through worth it. Recognition from peers is its own kind of magic. Like I said, the rest of the episode is medium, but it caps it off with a scene that is such a perfect send-off for the last 3 seasons, earning its fair share of goodwill. Graduation day is next, and it's the big finale. Unlike a lot of two-parters, the first part does more than just setup, but has some really important moments plot-wise, and for the characters. It begins with Faith passing the moral event horizon, killing a human being for the mayor, not just a demon or a vampire. While she's been wavering on the line for a while, this is truly the point of no return for her. Despite this, the viewers still care about her, and want her to be good. There is a nice scene between the mayor and Faith, building up the relationship and showing the humanity in both of them. Following up this, the mayor turns up at the school, and walks right into the Scoobies, taunting them. Giles responds by stabbing him. Reasonable, but unfortunately fruitless. It's hard to say enough how effective the mayor is as a villain. Skipping through some of the plot stuff, it's revealed Anya has seen a demon ascend, and offers her experience to the group. She then immediately abandons ship, as she really wants to live. She asks Xander to come with her, but he refuses, arguing that whatever role he has to play, that's enough. This shows his character development, and hints at Anya's future role in the show. Then the main event of the episode happens. Faith shoots Angel with a poisoned arrow, and the only cure is Slayer blood. This forces the confrontation between her and Buffy, just like Angelus did last season. Before that, however, there's another huge moment, as Wesley delivers news that the council refused to help Angel. Buffy is understandably upset by this, and quits the council, abandoning the millennial tradition of Slayer and Watcher, and striking her own path. Buffy refers to it as her graduation, and it represents a huge change in the status quo. It fits with the idea of empowerment, making your own choices, and not following the commands of an ethereal body. In a way it was inevitable, but this feels like the perfect place for it to happen. Wesley is dumbstruck, but just like usual, is unable to offer anything helpful. Oz is the one to actually find the cure, and Buffy heads off to get Slayer blood. When she finally confronts Faith, she wears a similar outfit, dark clothes and leather, and at that moment she believes she's willing to kill Faith to save Angel. They have a big old fight, but in the end Buffy brings out handcuffs. Just like her first confrontation with Angelus, she isn't prepared to go all the way, and like Faith, she's conflicted about what the right thing to do is. Finally, Buffy stabs Faith, but her expression is the exact same as Faith's was when she killed the mayor's aide. Shock, revulsion, fear, regret. Even though she went there with the intention to get Faith's blood, taking the final act was too far. Faith, on the other hand, offers one last bit of defiance, and leaps off the roof onto a passing truck, denying Buffy her blood and Angel's last hope. Boom. Cliffhanger. One of the first things we see in the next episode is the mayor's genuine worry and concern for Faith. While the relationship isn't normal, he does love her in whatever twisted way he can, and seeing that love from a purely evil villain creates conflict in the viewer, who want to hate him, but just can't. Buffy gives herself to Angel in a very sexually charged scene. He drains her, but not completely, so she's then rushed to the hospital. The whole hospital sequence is shot in one take, and it delivers on a huge amount of tension. First there's the worry about Buffy surviving, but immediately after we see the mayor in his cold fury about what happened to Faith. We follow him as he walks over to Buffy, and then without a word, he begins to strangle her. For the first time we see him follow up on his threats, and it's terrifying. We then cut to another Buffy dream, with a few clever bits of foreshadowing. Buffy in a clean apartment, everything boxed up and ready to move, representing next season. Faith reveals the mayor's weakness, his humanity. Just like every other major character, its basic motions that will be his downfall. In the end, Faith reaches out with a loving caress, but when the dream is over, and reality sets in. The gang prepares for the ascension with a long montage, and everyone gets ready. It happens during the mayor's speech, and it's revealed that the whole class is in on it, as they prepare to go to war. The whole sequence is very solid, aside from the questionable CGI on the giant snake. It works as the finale for the show as a whole, as everyone acknowledges the things that go bump in the night, but choose to fight them instead of cower. Some of the nameless characters die, which helps up the stakes a bit, although no one of real importance does. Buffy uses Face Knife to knock the mayor off guard, then blows him up with explosives, just like the judge. It's a bit lame to have the super big bag die in basically the same way twice, but blowing up the whole school was a smart idea, and was the only real way to end the high school hell portion of the show. Overall, the finale does exactly what it sets out to be, and it generally works. It's not as emotionally charged as last season, but it feels very conclusive, bringing everything together into a cohesive whole. So that was season 3. Overall, it was fantastic, especially the latter half. Even the worst episodes are better by half than the last season, and the thematic consistency is unparalleled, with intriguing ideas about the lies we tell ourselves, the lengths we'll go in relationships, and what kind of future we really want. The characters grow and evolve, and demonstrate that growth through their actions, making it feel meaningful. Season 3 is not my favorite season, but it's arguably the best. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I know it's been a bit of a wait since the last one, but they take a long time to make. It's a huge help to me if you can like, comment, subscribe, and be well.